Ocala Town Council special meeting November 16th, 2018 is now called to order. I'd like to say thank you guys for coming. We look forward to this open discussion amongst the council on some very important issues. And we'll get started right off. Jake, we're going to let you come up to the podium, so I know there's going to be questions. Lisa, I'm going to ask you to put those ordinance on the big screen so the audience can follow along with us.
Give a
I'm going to wait till they're up before we start. They're fairly complicated, so if you have questions, I'm not sure we'll have time for questions and answers today. We're on time restraint with some council members got to get to work and Jake's got to get out to go on a flight, but you can always email them to us, but if we can, we will answer anything if you have a comment. We'll try to keep that up. Does that help with following along with the discussion? Okay, great. First item on the agenda is the consideration of proposed amendments to section 26-1. That's the construction or other improvements within the street right-of-way, and section 28-9, parking on or obstructing sidewalks and public right-of-way. This is actually an issue that has been discussed for 3 years now, and probably many years before then, because it's fairly complicated. But the council is well versed on it, and they've had a lot of time to study it. But this meeting is intended to have an open discussion amongst council members, and I'm asking the council. We would have put the parking first, but since Jake has to leave early, we had to put that on the end of the agenda. But the issues of the right-of-way and the second item on the agenda will all have to tie in together with the paid parking if that is what the council decides to move forward with. So I ask if you have questions for Jake, we'll discuss them. That's no problem. But as far as the discussion between the council, we would prefer to wait until everything is presented, including, I think there's a presentation coming on the right-of-way, on the parking. So does that sound okay with all the council members? You're okay with that? Okay, good. Jake, does any council member want to start this off with anything that they have questions about in this first planning, in the first ordinance?
I'm gonna let Jake speak.
I can give a summary of what it's all about for the audience too. The purpose of this ordinance, as you said, is to clarify provisions in our right-of-way for obstructions or impediments. Posts and ropes, vegetation, things like that are typical examples. In the agenda item memo, the 20-foot site triangle, you guys are aware of that ordinance regulation is just carried over from our previous zoning ordinance and our UDO as well. It does specify that town trees in the right-of-way are not considered obstructions. And it also details that resident created designated parking areas. There's a photograph, a couple of them, for example, in your agenda packet, are not permitted. Sometimes they're like gravel little areas for parking in the right-of-way, or oyster shells, something like that. It also details that the town has the right to remove any obstruction in our town right-of-way, basically on our property. It just clarifies that, particularly if any damage is being done to the right-of-way, and those that might damage the town's right-of-way are responsible for repairing it and fixing up the damage so it's back to its previous condition. It also details a 5-foot radius around any public infrastructure point, like a fire hydrant or something like that, to be clear of any obstructions, and how that must remain clear. It also talks about how DOT, other than mailboxes and newspaper boxes, there's exemptions for that. And we have those same exemptions too, but DOT doesn't allow on their roads, which is essentially Oak Island Drive and Beach Drive for the most part. Don't allow obstructions, and they would enforce those on their end. And like you said, this has been a pending issue for a long time. I would see there are a lot of reasons to restrict this stuff, which are all outlined in the staff report. But until we get a directive for staff, all of those sort of cases are on hold for the time being. I won't go through over every single reason listed, but I will cover some of them, and I suppose you guys can discuss
I just
them.
realized that this is not going to be as helpful as we originally thought because we're unable to scroll as you talk about it. But as we ask a question, we will try to scroll to that part of the.
Okay.
And I could stay here on just the ordinances, but if you'd rather me pull up from the agenda packet and you'll see what's highlighted for changing.
I would rather do that, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was about to suggest. That'll be good.
You guys let us know if this helps you.
That way they can see the staff report that's online, and yeah, that makes sense. Some of the issues allowing impediments in the right-of-way create would be utility line maintenance. It could block those, or down the road if they needed to be expanded, something like that. You know, that could block it. Also, for uniformity's sake too, if DOT is going to be enforcing right-of-way impediments along their roads, suddenly you have a clear road there while all the other town roads have obstructions. You know, paid parking as well. If you permit obstructions in the right-of-way, and that could be the exact area you're trying to install paid parking locations, you know, that's a potential issue. And also down the road, you know, members on council change over time, and we could receive a separate directive years down the road to do the exact opposite, to enforce everything. So now you have a, you can do it, now you can't do it kind of thing. I think it's better just as a best practice to have consistency throughout. And all the rest of my thoughts are pretty laid out. We've discussed this in the past through one-on-one meetings, and it's been on previous council agendas. I mean, you guys have heard everything I've pretty much had to say on the topic, and it's all laid out in that staff report. So I don't want to belabor all those points. But at the end of the day, all we're merely asking is that someone not install something on property that doesn't belong to them. I wouldn't go to my neighbor's property and install a sign and then yell at him the moment he tried to remove it. You know, that's all we're asking. You know, this is been an ongoing issue, and hopefully we'll get a decision made today. We'll see.
Jake, how long have these specific ordinances been in? Are these just
20
ones that have been parked, or how long has the ordinance that the no hard structure in the right of way been in existence?
As long as I can remember.
At least since I've been here, which is 3 years. But you know, the previous zoning ordinance, which has this language in it, was written in 2001. But I would wager it goes way before that.
Early 90s also. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Any questions about other questions?
Can we scroll, if you don't mind? Does any council member have any question? Lisa, scroll back to the pictures, because to me the pictures, the public may not understand what Jake was talking about when he was talking about people installing parking areas in the right of way.
Great doing this with a laptop mouse.
Sorry.
Multifunctional.
Like the right click is always wanted to. I can do it on this screen too. I don't know if that helps, or if that would just make confuse things more.
There we go. Now bring it over here. That's what I need.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
Those are the parking designated areas I was referring to, that some citizens will, and you know, another point I failed to mention is stormwater too. You know, these kind of things can affect, say down the road the town wants to invest and install a lot more stormwater ditches or swells, that kind of thing, in the right of way to, you know, better capture that kind of stuff when we have a storm or a lot of rain. Allowing this kind of stuff can affect the way all that works. Or might have to remove everything that's permitted in order to install that kind of stuff. And it seems like a good idea to invest in stormwater, especially given recent events. You know, that's another issue permitting this kind of stuff causes.
Does that require a permit?
Right now, all of these kind of cases are on hold until something, all of those would be enforced if you guys, we wouldn't permit any new ones up if you all decided that's what you wanted to do. We want the ordinance at the end of the day to reflect the desires of our elected officials. We don't want to be enforcing things that you guys might actually not want them to be enforced. So that's
But if it's
another
an
reason this is
ordinance,
before
it
you.
needs to be enforced.
Yes,
And it's been an ordinance forever, and why would we I'm not sure the reason for changing it.
I agree. I don't think it should change. I think, the 26-1 as it's currently written now says, fences, posts and ropes not in the right of way, and other obstructions. That's sort of a catch-all thing for that picture there, and vegetation and anything else. That's not specifically exempt like a mailbox.
Jake, in layman's terms, I've heard all kinds of different numbers, but where is, from the side of the road, how far up is the right-of-way?
So that can vary. Sometimes, when you think of right-of-way, a lot of people often think from the edge of the street pavement to like their front property line. But that's not really the right-of-way. The right-of-way is pretty much from one person's property line, front property line, all the way to the other side. It's the entirety of the road. The pavement itself, cars drive on, and then both the grassy areas on both sides. Typically, that's 60 feet. It can be a little bit larger on like a road like East Oak Island Drive or a major arterial road. For the residential roads, most of them are all going to be 60 feet, 50 feet wide on some of them in more narrow areas like Yopon area. From the edge of the road pavement to the front property line, that can vary depending on the total road right-of-way width, but typically that's going to range between 15 to 20 feet.
So basically, keep everything on your property, which is marked by your property stakes, which is what's on the deed.
Mm-hmm.
Your property from here to here to here to here.
You can find the stakes out there. There's also clues I, tell people that I look for. Any infrastructure point, like the power boxes you see, or water valves or hookups, going to the
Hydrants.
houseward side of that. Those kind of things help too. Or
Water
oftentimes you can see
meters.
your neighbor's property stake because you might be doing some surveying and it lines up with that.
Would it be safe to say that if, for lack of a better term, enforced a 15 or 20 foot, depending on the area, setback as it relates to parking?
If it's made 20 foot, for example, like the temporary real estate type signs, that would pretty much cover the whole right-of-way for the most part.
So in the picture we're seeing right here, it appears to be new construction from the one on the right anyway. So when the permit comes in, when they submitted this, did they submit it with you may not this particular one, but do they ever submit it like that, where they want a 20-foot wide or whatever gravel parking area in front of their house? Is that?
No, we've never seen a permit come in saying, hey, let us install this kind of thing in the right-of-way. They just do it without a permit, and then they get a code enforcement letter from us.
Okay.
But since this came up, you mentioned permits as an issue, I have adjusted the checklists and the permitting process we do. So on the front end, we check for right-of-way obstructions when we first review the site, and then at the end, our final zoning inspection too, we also check to make sure they haven't installed a palm tree or something like that, for example, in the road right-of-way. And we will not issue a CO if they've done that. We make them put it back on their own property line.
Okay, is this the gravel here in that picture I was referring to, is that considered an obstruction or just an encroachment?
I'd call that an obstruction.
Okay.
Or an impediment, something that is not permitted.
Not permitted, okay.
I mean, if you guys want to say it needs to be elevated, and you like that kind of thing, that you don't see that as a problem, but you just don't want to post and ropes that would prevent someone from, pulling off the road or something, you can tweak this however you want. It's your boat. I wouldn't be terribly upset if that's what happened, but that's at your discretion.
But it's a parking area, so you're going to have a vehicle there. So how is that not going to be an obstruction?
I think there are problems with that. for example, the ones I mentioned before, if there's utility lines over there, you're making it harder for someone to, do maintenance work on a line that they need to get to. It causes problems like that.
As soon as you have a water line bust right there, you're gonna have them screaming because you're messing up the gravel.
Yes, absolutely. And when I say obstruction, I kind of meant when I was thinking,
A physical.
say an emergency vehicle, you need to quickly get over to let the fire truck pass or something. If someone's got posts and ropes out there, vegetation, you can't get out there off the road. It's a safety thing too, I suppose.
And this, Jake, this is where I have some of the problems. My older house, I no longer have, when it was built, there's natural trees probably 4 foot off the road. The house was approved, got the CO for it, and now we're gonna say, those trees can't be there. So now we're gonna tell the homeowners they gotta spend thousands of dollars to uproot all this stuff because it originally was approved.
The ordinance that's proposed here specifically states if it's town trees that are in the right of way, and we have quite a bit of them, those are fine. Those are our trees. We don't want to cut our own town trees down. If they retroactively plant a tree in the right of way without permission, then that is not okay.
They were there when the house was built, and they just left as a cluster.
Sounds like those are just town trees that are always existed.
They have always existed.
Yeah,
But it's
so-
on a side road,
Yeah.
so that would be considered town trees?
Yeah, kind of like, the row of trees on East Oak Island Drive when you
Yeah.
come over Middleton that the town put in. Like those, be considered those.
And I'm not referring to any specific property, but you go out here, and I've seen it in several places where they go out and put, for lack of a better term, pilings on either side of the driveway. You know what I'm referring to?
Yep.
Now, that's an obstruction, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Rocks, sometimes it's landscaping material, posts and ropes. A lot of times it seems like they're put up to prevent someone from parking in front of their property, and they often think they own up to the edge of the road pavement when they don't. It's 15 to 20 feet back.
And there's nothing that protects the front of my house from my neighbor parking his car in front of, as long as he doesn't leave it longer than 72 hours?
That's correct. If it's X amount of feet from an intersection, I think there's police or fire codes about that, or I think 15 feet from a fire hydrant, stuff like that. I mean, it depends on the scenario. A lot of people, seed the right of way or plant grass, and that's fine. This ordinance doesn't prevent that, but they want to protect their grass, especially if there's a construction site next door and they don't like the construction guys, parking there on their new grass. Yeah, that's another thing that's in here too. It says, construction vehicle can't just, that's actually in the next agenda item memo, excuse me. Can't park in the neighbor's driveway without their permission.
And that is all because we have right-of-way parking that is legal on Oak Island for now.
Mm-hmm. It's temporary. I mean, those building permits last for 6 months, and typically, Steve might correct me on this, but the average time it takes to build a house is about that.
Councilman Weinkauf, was some of you concerned because of the things that are in the right-of-way now that the people have had for ever since they've owned the properties?
Since I've been coming down here for I don't know how many years, there's always been something, and a majority of the people comply. But you've got, I would almost say, hundreds that because I actually went out and measured, and Councilor Blaylock and myself actually rode and looked. But there's hundreds scattered out through the town that were put there, and most of them are roughly about 7 to 8 foot off the road. And a lot of them are 8 foot off the road. But if you start going to say you got to move it 10 foot off the road, you're looking at people spending thousands of dollars trying to comply. And you got a lot of people here on fixed incomes that can't afford it. So this stuff's been going on. The rules have been in the books, but we haven't enforced it.
Right.
And now we want to come back and say we're going to enforce it.
Well, I'd like to frame this discussion in a little bit larger terms. I think you raised a good point, Councilman Wonka. The conundrum is whether these ordinances existed, they weren't enforced. And as a result, we have a very checkered history of things in the right-of-way, some of which are aesthetically pleasing, some of which are in fact safety issues. And what we're proposing in this plan is to have an absolute standard. That's how I see it. Everything will come out. There'll be a massive effort to redress problems that go back years, in some cases to the very beginning. Or we can adopt a modified ordinance, which is what Councilman Blaylock and Weinkoff proposed, which grandfathers 7, 8, 10 feet. I mean, we talked a little bit about the differences, saying these are pre-existing conditions. They can exist, although we retain the absolute right, should we need to enter that right away. For my money, that's a more sensible approach to our populace because these things have existed for quite some time. In effect, we gave implied consent, previous councils. Where I think our focus needs to be is safety. That can be an absolute standard. If there's a safety issue in the right-of-way, it has to be removed, period. And I would also add that where there is a denial because of an obstruction, a denial of public access to a waterway or a beach, that needs to be removed, no questions asked. That should be our focus, not taking apart people's landscaping or walking around the town measuring, and I think there'll be hundreds of cases, easily, from what I can see. 400 or 500. And we're going to spend our energy and time, and inevitably, I believe we'll end up in litigation. So I'm for the modified version of this that Weinkoff, Blaylock, I'll call it that proposal. That to me makes more sense. That's more doable, and that can be phased in with an abatement period. But I think our efforts need to be laser focused on safety and denial of public access. There are plenty of safety and denial of public access issues, especially on the intercoastal, where things are physically blocking access to the waterway. I mean, they're clear. Ropes, poles, lights in the right-of-way need to be removed. But if we're going to tear up half the gardening in the island, I think we're going to ask for problems we don't want.
Well, if you look at the picture right here, they have the one on the left, there's a boat parked in the right-of-way. Is that a violation?
Yes, that's a safety issue. Absolutely, clearly.
Right. So those are up front, those are easy, to see. So I think that's what we're talking about, is dealing with the obvious ones and then going back and trying to work with the others. But from this point on, no more. Am I on that right?
I think that it's always been there.
Yeah.
And that is a safety issue.
Yeah. But if
the one that's the landscaping though, when you go tell them he's going to pull a road in there.
right.
And you go tell him you can't put that boat there. Well, you allowed my gravel parking there. I guess my point, I guess the way I feel about it is if I'm doing 80 miles an hour down an interstate in a 70-mile-an-hour zone, well, okay, I'm not caught for years, but when I get caught, they are certainly not going to change that speed limit to 80 miles an hour so I don't get a ticket or so I'm in the right. I mean, I just don't, it's been on the books forever, nothing in the right-of-way.
I don't
So,
have any
that's
trouble.
just-
I don't have any trouble with that, but as was said before, it's going to be a logistical nightmare to go back and try to get these people to move all this stuff off the right-of-way that they have had there. I mean, it's been generations that have had stuff there. So I think, can you deal, Jake, can you think it's dealing with a case-by-case basis, or is that
So there's
asking for trouble?
If you grandfather existing ones in, there's a level of complexity that is going to be difficult to address, which is, how do you prove which one that's been there for 5 years, for example, versus something that was just installed last week, and he's just saying it was or installed tomorrow, and he's just saying it's been there for 5 years. We have Google Street View, which is great, but the newest, December 2013, is how far back that goes. So I suppose you'd have to actually video record every street in town and then pull up the video to see what it looks like at that date when it was done. That's the only way I know to think about it. That's quite an undertaking.
How do you do it with building? I mean, if you go somewhere where you know that something has been built that's not, even if it was 10 years ago? I'm sorry, Steve.
Suppose it
I mean, I'm
depends
just
on the
trying,
specific-
I'm just trying to see how it's dealt with in other ordinances, laws, or whatever. I'm reading here where DOT, even if we give them 10-foot, 15-foot, whatever, that's not going to apply to Oak Island Drive, Beach Drive, Middleton, Kingsland, correct? Because that's a state road.
Correct.
And theirs says absolutely nothing, correct?
But they've been enforcing theirs.
No,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, the answer to your building question is if it was in compliant when it was constructed, then the codes change, we can't enforce them to bring it into compliance. It's grandfathered in. If it wasn't compliant with the code and it's a life safety issue, then we have the authority to make them correct it, and we have done that as we've discovered some life safety issues. I did send Lisa some photos of some utility work in the right of way so you can see how much area that they actually need to get in there and work on these utilities. And I sent her one of a violation that's recently done, and I think we've got this one on hold as well. Lisa, can you put those up?
So can we apply that to the ordinance?
If it was in compliance when it was installed, nothing was permitted at the time. People just eased into the property, we've had vacant lots beside a house and they encroached over onto the neighbor's property.
Oh, wow.
oh, wow.
Yeah, and this gentleman was debating with me about that. It had always had a flower bed out there, and I was able to pull back some old aerial photos, and what it was a railroad tie that was laid down on the ground, and it wasn't 3 blocks high and filled like that. It really was just at ground level.
There's no way you could get to water lines or.
There's electrical issues here as well. The lights that he put out there, those are in the right of way, and no electrical permits were issued. He's got what I call flying splices at the base of the electrical pole where it's just wires with wire nuts on them. And this here is just where they're having to work in the right of ways to repair. I believe it was a sewer, possibly. I'm not quite sure. But this is where they had to go in. I think this was where they had to do a repair to
Replace a pit.
replace a pit. I mean, they've got to do massive amount of work. I mean, they need a large area to get in there and do it. They're almost to the property line with that repair there.
Yeah.
I mean, so if we move forward and allow these types of obstructions, we want to be careful. I mean, even the town attorney advised us to issue some type of licensing and not do it by ordinance, because you could create an easement and it could be more difficult to get them to remove these obstructions. So, and I mean, if you do want to proceed with allowing these things, any existing things, we can approach them with a license prescription for them to have it remain, but with the understanding that if the town needs to go into that area, then it's subject to removal at their expense.
Did you ever find what Brian said about all that when we were talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, it's there, it's on your desk. Or in front of you. No, this is minutes.
I didn't-
And it's from the,
sorry.
May council meeting.
Sorry.
Just a
Okay.
little highlight.
Okay, thank you.
Starts.
We don't want to create any type of ordinance that's going to be subjective, where we have to go out there and make a determination whether it is, and Jake can speak better about that.
Well, something you mentioned, violations are not grandfathered in over time just by them existing for a long time. Like Steve said, if something was permitted and built a code at the time and it was all valid and done, just because an ordinance might change after the fact, we don't retroactively actively go in and make someone change something that was validly permitted. Thing is, as we've established, obstructions in the right-of-way have never been validly permitted. They've always been permissible. So there aren't any permitted right-of-way obstructions out there. They would all be subject to enforcement.
So can you go back on a case-by-case basis and permit? Is that what you're saying?
No, because no permit was ever issued or applied for existing ones now. If you're suggesting that we do permit them and we make the permit on a case-by-case basis starting now, I guess that's a different conversation.
And that's also putting an awful lot of liability on you guys.
Well, I think we need to have a measure of common sense here. From a legal point of view, in terms of creating immunity, you would need 4,000 or so individual contracts per Mr. Eddy's proposal, and I would submit, again, that's not practical. So we have a situation which I believe can be resolved. The major safety issues, the major denial of access issues can be fixed. And with the Weinkauf-Blaylock proposal, which council has reviewed before, we have a limited grandfather. We retain at all points the absolute right to do whatever we need to do as a town in the right-of-way, even if it's in the 10-foot or 8-foot, whatever we decide. That, to me, gives us a real focus going forward. The picture on the left is clearly a safety violation, without question. You can't pull a car over there. That's within several feet of the roadway. But the other one, clearly right-of-way work was needed, and we exercised our right to put that piece of equipment in. I think there has to be some balance here. I'm worried that we'll be overwhelmed running down violations that go back 20, 25 years, and this will be massively disruptive. And frankly, we have other issues, I think, that we need to deal with as a town. I'll rest my case.
That was the town attorney's recommendation.
Yes.
For the license, not mine.
I understand that, but you're going to knock on 4,000 doors and get 4,000 agreements? I don't think so.
4,000 violations, though. There's not 4,000 of them. Give me a rough estimate.
Ooh. So we have about 12,000 parcels on the
Okay.
island. That's parcels, not lots. And the island is about 70% built out.
Okay?
Just from me doing my job, code enforcement on this issue, roughly about 10% of the island may have code enforcement violations. And that's not, DOT would take, I don't know, there's a lot on West Beach Drive. DOT would take care of all those, so that helps as far as staff workload goes.
Do you actually have to take care of the violations that are on DOT right away?
I've been in talks with them. I'd send them a spreadsheet with the addresses, which is a heck of a lot easier if, say, it's 100, than sending 100 different letters out. Just to, multi-jurisdictional cooperation, help them out. They'd be doing.
But you don't enforce those violations?
Well, in the
They do.
past we have, but we do have a maintenance agreement with DOT, so we have the authority to, if we so chose to do so. But I like the idea of having them focus on their roads so I can get the rest of the island done faster. It's some heavy lifting, but, and it will take time. I'm up to the task. If we have heavy lifting to do, then fine.
I have
we
no
heavy
doubt,
lifting to do.
Jake.
But,
I have
take a
no
year or
doubt.
two.
Yeah, we had met with DOT on another issue up in Yopon area about a parking lot. And when we talked with them, they said they would take it, and whatever we gave addresses or whatever, they would be the ones that would contact the person within the DOT right away and have them remove their obstacles. So they've already
So if
told
there's a lot of them on West Beach Drive, then you're talking about DOT issues. So,
There's quite a bit on Beach Drive, west and east, not just west, but there's quite a bit.
And that's because
But that's
people
DOT,
do it-
That's right, that's DOT. If like I said, I went out looking and measuring, actually got out and measured. if you went to a 10-foot radius, you would have the high hundreds we'd have to enforce. If you went back to 8 foot, you're looking at the very low hundreds. And to me, you're going to have a lot of problems if you try to enforce that 10 foot. At 8 foot, you can get in there and do the work you need to be done. You can park off the side of the road if you had to park, and it doesn't instruct anything. And to me, you take the less of the two roads and try to enforce that.
Another thing,
About how far is that we needed to repair, they needed to repair?
we went back, the one on the right, we went all the way back, probably onto the property.
Yeah. There's instances where it's going to happen.
Whatever line y'all draw and say it's 10 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet, or whatever, the people are gonna call on the neighbor and say, look, their bush is hanging over 3 feet into it, or 2 feet into it. And if we do a height limit or whatever kind of planning that we do in that, we're gonna be monitoring that every day as well. So whatever you do in the right of way, it's gonna take manpower to do whatever you wanna do.
All right,
Well, it's not a-
Is it going to take additional employees?
For right away,
Depends on what you really wanted to do, I'd say.
yeah.
I would, why couldn't we use, boy, I'm gonna get hated for this. Why couldn't we train our police officers and they could be involved in this whole thing as far as violations go? I mean, why can't they be trained to also be involved?
Well, we can do that, but I don't know if we want our police officers getting out, putting a tape on the edge of the measuring back, because neighbors do call on neighbors, and neighbors do make complaints and says, look, on Saturday, they came down for one weekend out of this year and planted a bush that's in violation because the overhang is hanging inside the 8 feet. And those are the kind of things that we get our calls about. Now, I don't know if the policeman would have caught that weekend, or the next time he rode down the road or whatever. Yes, I believe they can help with the parking on it, the items on it, the safety issues, and those kind of things, yes. But as far as the landscaping or those kind of things, I don't know.
Well, let's just say that manpower will be needed. It will clearly tax existing manpower, and we may need additional manpower. What I would hope that we would do with this decision is have a very clear plan that's communicated to the public, and an absolute focus, and I'm going to repeat, on safety and denial of public access. That's where we start. Forget about measuring. Measuring bushes is the next and last phase of this. We need to get obstructions, which are safety hazards, out of the right-of-way. Poles, lights, bricks, boats, etc. And then we need to stop people from treating public right-of-ways to the beach and to the waterways as if it's their private property. It's not. That's the focus. That's where we start. Vegetation comes, in my mind, last. That's phase 3 of this campaign. If we chase bushes and we don't get the boats out of the right-of-way, we're missing the point.
So we can start that now, though.
Yes.
I mean, that can be, and you have done that. You have already started this campaign, have you not?
We started 3 years ago, back with Chad, and he actually had a big map in his office, and he would highlight the areas he'd covered. And in less than a month's time, he had maybe a large part of the island covered, which was great. And then it all got put on hold because I've just noticed out of all sorts of different types of code enforcement cases I do, could be high grass or, trash and debris or whatever, those who get the letter dig their heels in the most when it comes to right-of-way obstructions. They fight back harder than if it were a dilapidated structure or anything else. Not sure why, but, assuming this is approved by you, just be forewarned, you'll be getting many angry calls over the last couple of years. And, I guess that's okay. It's part of the job, I suppose.
Well, I would say that somebody, I don't remember which one of you said, I think it was David maybe, communicate with the public. I don't think, from talking to people when we started this whole thing, most people aren't aware. I wasn't aware of how much right-of-way there was. They think they plant grass out there, that's their grass, they own it. I've heard that so many times, I take care of it. Well, they need to understand, we need to communicate to them, that's fine, that you take care of it. But we need to have a campaign, if you will, to tell them, this is not right, this is not yours, and we are going to be in the process of enforcing it. So prepare yourself.
I completely agree with that. I did include a citizen notification plan attached on the last page of your agenda item memo for this. Talks about putting out brochures and flyers around town, advertisements in the paper, town Facebook page, et cetera, et cetera.
Good, okay.
I would, just to comment on my part, it seems to me that if a person is in violation and there is a compromise, as Mr. Councilman Block has suggested, and Councilman Wyckoff and Councilman Baylock, then they would be, and we notified them that, what is the percentage that are cooperative? I had a call the other day from someone that had got a letter. His tree had been there 20 years. He put it there when he when he built the house. And, you know, before I had a chance to call you, Jake, and get back to him, he had already called a landscaper and had him come move his tree and moved it to Bowling Springs, where he now lives. So there's people that will comply if they realize there is a rule. But, you know, if you come in and say everybody's got to move 20 feet back, that's where the real big issue is going to come in.
Abatement, yes, that's correct.
Steve, Jake, when builders come in or even private property people come in and get their permits, do we have something that addresses what they're not allowed to do in right-of-ways? Or can we come up with something when they do their paperwork, before they get their CO, they can sign off on stating this is not permissible in right-of-ways, how far the right-of-way is?
We can absolutely create
Because that will solve a lot of the issues if we have to go back, because they're already going ahead and signing off of it, they know what it is.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's a good idea. Currently, sometimes when we write the CO, the owner doesn't do anything in the right of way until after we leave. And then, you know, we're unfortunately not on every street every day, and then it pops up. And
But if we have that paper,
Yeah,
that gives us something to go back and have a leg to stand on, saying,
what's called a non-conversion.
It may need to be at a lower level also, because some of these homes are spec homes.
Yeah, so I was
But
getting ready to
you can't
say,
tell
and if it's
homeowners,
given
so
to a
when you get your
builder,
lights turned on or your
Right.
water, you need to be given a package that says this is what's allowed to do
Yes.
in Oak Island.
Welcome to Oak Island package. You know,
Yeah.
beach,
Yes.
you know, explain
we have
it.
those,
Just-
don't we, David? Don't they give those out
We
downstairs?
do, and it tells them the bullet points and what they
are
can.
they signing off, saying they acknowledge it, they approve it before they get a CO?
He says.
That's what we need to look at, because that will give them the idea
Teeth that go
what they
back.
can, and we can say, look, this is what you were informed of, this is what you signed off on, and you acknowledged that you knew what the ordinance was.
Right.
Yeah, you know, the 10% right now is manageable. I think we can do it with current staff. You know, we're not gonna go out there and do a massive attack on all these violations. We would do it, you know, a procedural way, going through areas and working those. And then, you know, like I said, if we give them a lot of amount of time to correct these violations, a year, 2 years, something reasonable, the impact of the cost to them would be minimized. You know, there's several reasons as to not do this, and very few other than giving someone the right to beautify the land, the right of way. That's just, I don't know, it's just a clean right of way to me is what the town's objective should be.
Well, I think Councilman Blaylock and Weinkauf make good points. I would agree with both of those. And I actually like the communication plan on page 8. I would suggest that 2 additional things be included in the communication plan. One is a date certain when the enforcement's actually going to begin. Because in my mind, this notice precedes any enforcement. We give the public time. We try to enlist public support. And again, just from my perspective alone, speaking as an individual, the first phase of this campaign should be safety and denial of public access. That people need to be put on notice about that. And then the abatement period, which Mr. Eady's mentioned probably should be in there as well, so people know if they get a notification, they've got 18 months to fix it. This is all about communication. I think there will always be people, unfortunately, who don't want to comply for whatever reason. But the majority of our citizens will comply when they understand what we're doing, which is ensuring safety, right, and promoting public access, and trying to have a uniform standard about how our roadways look. You know, it's hard to oppose that if you can get that message out there. So I think going forward, what Councilman Weinkoff is suggesting about ensuring people don't build ordinance violations, and what Councilman Blaylock's saying about communicating this and having time frames and an abatement period, I think that's what we need.
You know, and the big thing is, we've done this, we've beat this horse forever. We got to get out there and get it done. We got to start showing some enforcement on these things, because that's what happened the last time, isn't it? I mean, it just kind of went away.
I don't know. I will tell you, I am troubled by this paragraph. I didn't want to bring it up, but I will since you mentioned it, Councilman. Staff was given a directive to halt enforcement. Who gave that directive? Where did that come from?
Let me clarify that.
What does that mean?
Probably not the best way to phrase that.
Okay.
Another way to phrase that would be these sort of cases, which have been pre-existing and quite numerous. I've been sitting at my desk for some time. They've all been put on hold until we have a directive from you guys, so the ordinance actually reflects your desires.
Okay. So that's just the way that's phrased troubled me. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So there was no directive from council.
We just put it on hold until you guys decided what you wanted it to say.
That distinction is important. Okay.
Okay, can we move on now? Okay, good. Number 2 on the agenda is number 3 on the agenda, excuse me. Consideration of proposed amendments to section 28-10, parking prohibitations, and section 28-10.1, public parking on town right-of-way.
He's got, never mind, go ahead.
Just so I'm clear on that previous topic, is there a directive for me to, what am I going to do?
Well, that's what I was
We're
getting ready to say. I think we need to hear about paid parking first before we address this issue.
We were going to hold, I started at the first, I stated we would hold all the decision-making till the end.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Jake.
This next item on the agenda, this isn't paid parking. This is merely clarifying some language in our ordinance 28-10.1 that does talk about parking in the right-of-way, but it's not paid parking. There's sections that are contradictory to each other. You know, as you guys know, the police department handles right-of-way obstructions that are on wheels, like a boat on a boat trailer or something that's been in the right-of-way for a year or something like that. They handle that. Hardened obstructions is code enforcement, posts and ropes, fence, something like that. And so, you know, we communicate and work with each other, and as we find obstructions like that, we'll let them know, and they'll let us know when they see stuff during their daily activities. So we met with them in order to clear up this confusion, because they had trouble enforcing this kind of stuff when you have contradictory language in the ordinance. So we're essentially proposing to remove letter C in 28-10.1, 28-10.1, excuse me, because it's superfluous, and it makes the ordinance easier to enforce. And we also added in some grammatical improvements, but all of this is relatively minor and just for better consistency. And that's really about it for this one. All this is to make it so the police department can enforce in a more clear way obstructions of that nature, an old boat trailer or something, or an old junk vehicle that's been in the right-of-way for a while.
Is it legal to park a boat on the right-of-way and leave it there?
Not for a year, for 72 hours.
72 hours. Okay.
It's okay, maybe you have a vacation house down here, you come down for the weekend.
Okay.
You live on Northeast 58th or something, and yeah.
But right now, you can park that boat in anyone's right-of-way, in front of anyone's property, whether you own it or not?
Well, I wouldn't phrase it as anyone's right-of-way, the town's right-of-way.
Oh, in front of anyone's property if it's in the town right away.
Yeah, as long as you're not in their, private property or blocking access to their house, something like that. Seems, that's not a scenario that comes up very often. People just, want to park in front of their house because that's where they're walking to.
So people are not parking their boat in front of their next door neighbor's house?
I can't think of any call I've received since I've been here
Wouldn't think so.
saying that.
But we
I've
have,
had neighbors call about the neighbor parking in front of their own house and don't
Now,
like
there
it.
are people that use some of the street ends on Yacht Drive.
I mean,
to reinforce the boat situation, since I spent a little time on a road over the years, I have seen boats sitting on the side of the road with the tires rotted off of them. It hasn't moved in a while, I don't think. And that's the kind of stuff, the egregious violations like that need to be addressed ASAP, in my opinion.
Adopting this will expedite our enforcement of that.
but this doesn't prohibit me from having a couple of people over to the house and pulling my car in for a couple of hours on the street right away.
Exactly, it does, yeah, that is, yeah.
I had a business call me the other day, reference a wedding. They had a wedding on Yacht Drive. They had 100 guests. There was cars parked everywhere. There was a porta-john placed on the street end. Now, that's a clear, isn't putting a porta-john on a street end,
It's not okay.
it's not okay. All right. What her question was, how are you going to handle something like that when you have a party, when you have a wedding like that, and you have all these people? Where are you going to park them all?
Well, fortunately, typically for weddings, they're not staying there for a couple weeks. They're in, they're out, the neighbors might be temporarily aggravated, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that was the problem, is the
Same
neighbors
as
were having.
Sheila's example, just stretched out a bit more, having someone having their annual 4th of July barbecue.
Yeah. Well, the neighbors were having a fit, that was the problem, and they thought that in front of their house was their parking area, and these people were violating that, which in reality it's not.
Yeah, I actually
You have that same problem at South Harbor, don't you? I've been over there a few times.
So these changes, Jake, are relatively minor. I think where this, actually, the import of this is going to be most important for the police in terms of enforcement. So, Mr. Kelly, I want to ask you if this is going to be a point of emphasis for our new policing philosophy.
Yes, it is. And,
So cars are actually going to go up and down the streets?
yes.
I'd love to see one on my street. Okay.
Well, the thing about it is, we're supposed to have, and we never have, I don't know whatever happened to it, we're supposed to have districts.
They are doing it, and the police have been doing it. We get a report from them showing
Okay.
where they go and what they see, and they've been giving it to Jake.
Well, my question is District 5 is mine? Do I have an officer that's assigned to District 5, or officers that are assigned to District 5, so I can work with them?
Yeah, they rotate them out, I think, on a monthly basis, but I don't know which one's assigned to you right now. That would be something you could ask Speedy about.
Okay, all right, because I'd like to work with them on it, because when we had the hurricane, I drove the streets and talked to people, and that would have been an ideal situation for the police department to do also.
Yeah, we had made a recommendation before to the chief about having them come out and meet each one of y'all, because the mayor had asked the same question about who was in her district. It'd be nice for them to be able to work together.
Right, exactly.
Now that maybe we can get that done.
Good, okay, outstanding, thank you.
But this is, does anybody else have any questions regarding this? This kind of also goes hand in hand with the paid parking issue. All of this would change if the council decides to move forward with paid parking, and it would have to be customized a little bit more to handle things like big events, maybe, and things like that. So we're going to discuss this after the paid parking as well.
For the time being, I would recommend adopting this. I have a spreadsheet of violations of old boat trailers and things like that,
Okay.
ready to go off to the police department the moment it gets approved.
All right. We'll table that until the end of all the discussion today. Is that all the questions we have for Jake regarding this? Everyone? Okay. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, Jake.
Good job. Next on the agenda is the discussion of paid parking. And David, I believe there was a representative from one of the management companies that staff particularly liked or was interested in hearing from, and we will have more, but this will be a good example for us to hear and the public to.
Yes, ma'am. I'll let Lisa describe that a little bit better. She came in, we were out of town somewhere else, and Lisa and I believe Jake sat in on a conversation and a presentation from this individual, and I'll let her introduce him.
Lisa?
Yes, we have Eric here, and I'll actually let him introduce himself, but I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go into as far as this specific company, but I will say it was different from presentations we'd had in the past. It seemed like maybe there are more options for us. We could tailor something more specific to our town rather than just buy into someone's pre-planned package.
Well, when we started, or when the council originally started looking, it's been 6 years ago about. So there's a lot more technology and a lot less invasiveness to your town now, and more ways to do it.
And I'll let you know that Eric was just told he was coming here yesterday, so.
Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thanks. I'll just talk real quickly, as this is fairly informal. You're not quite sure what you want to do, and we could design a zillion things around what you may or may not want to do. But what I will do is tell you a little bit about our company, and then maybe suggest some options to you about how to consider it or frame the issues from your perspective. And then obviously at a certain point we get to a formal RFP process, which I think we've seen a history or an older version, which I have some follow-up questions on. And then again, like Lisa said, it's a relatively short notice, so I won't have significant numbers of details today, but I'm hoping that you won't need them.
And I'm sorry, will you state your whole name for the record, please?
I'm sorry?
Will you state your whole name for the record, please?
That's Eric Kraus. NC Parking Company is the company that I represent, and they provide hospitality, staffing, and parking solutions to hotels, hospitals, garages, flat lots, and municipalities in North Carolina. NC Parking Co. is the DBA in this market. The larger company is called United Parking Partners out of New England. Also have an affiliation with Parkway Corporation out of Philadelphia, which Parkway goes back 80 years. The company NC Parking Co. and United Parking Partners go back 10 years. What sets NC Parking Co. different or apart is that it's more of a focus on user experience and revenue generation. We have a significant amount of lots that are in private ownership hands. For example, when the company became NC Parking Co., we actually took over a local company in Wilmington and went to all of the owners of the lots and basically promised them a significant lift in revenue, as well as a significantly cleaner lot and better user experience. That we've been able to do that through some work and some of the technology that we offer. We have over 250 locations nationwide, which we service over 2 million self-parked vehicles and over 200,000 valet vehicles. We really strive to deliver clean sites, efficient traffic flow, significant revenue generation, but the most important thing is the unsurpassed user experience. That's what we try to do. Relative to what this particular solution is, where you haven't had paid parking, you're considering going to it, I don't know quite how to feel about following up the right-of-way issues, but it sounds like you're obviously tackling a lot of things at a short period of time. What I would suggest is probably cleaning up and clarifying some of the RFP. This RFP is written around enforcement first, and revenue generation and user experience last. I would flip that on its head. You are a tourist town with a significant number of residents. people come and want to stay and obviously generate revenue towards the local businesses, and we want to improve that, not just keep it status quo. So in that realm, you know, if we talk about enforcement, you know, we want to talk about using carrots rather than sticks. Revenue generation, we obviously want to make it easy for everyone to understand both the rates, the process to paying for their parking. We want to have very clean and clear signage, as well as offering vehicles and service personnel with very, very clear markings so the public and the visitors understand what is they're doing. And hopefully we will get everybody to run lockstep with us through this change in process and deliver to the town a significant revenue split. NC Parking Co. and United Parking Partners, we offer more of an owner's mentality from a revenue perspective and really want to sit and ride next to you as your partner in this process. So as revenues come in, we recapture our costs and then split the town share back to you. You actually get paid first before we do, and we guarantee a certain level. And then over a certain level, we actually put a ceiling on our revenue split. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Are you the company that provides the Tuolumne Beach?
No.
Do you provide any beaches around here that we could?
We have, let me get back to you on that. As I'm fairly late to the process here, I probably don't have as much information.
Can we, if I may, can we just talk conceptually? I realize you had a very brief amount of time to prepare, but look, just in terms of the concept you just presented, which is intriguing. So you, I assume based on your analysis, the number of available spaces, traffic flow, et cetera, would give us a guarantee for some X amount of dollars, and then beyond that, there's a split between the management company and the town? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, so as the group, and I didn't prepare this pro forma, but several pro formas have been delivered and I've seen them. That's in essence what it's looking to do. So, you know, where you've never had it before, it's hard to understand, okay, what kind of revenue could possibly be generated. So I believe that they've taken in a number of variables. What would be wonderful if we had more exact DOT traffic statistics that we could lean on and do this, but basically from the number of available spots, try to extrapolate a rough churn rate based on monthly visitors. So
sure.
Obviously you're going to turn those lots a lot more in August than you will in December. And then from there, try to estimate a rough cost that either the user would bear or the market would bear and come out to a certain number there. Now, it's a wonderful exercise in mathematics and statistics and all of those things. At the end of the day, you know, experience will tell. So that's why we like to do a performance-based model with the relative guarantee to you of a certain point and then a revenue split above that. From our costing perspective, depending on some of the questions that we would need to get answered from the RFP, we could give you a number. You know, here's what we think we could operate or satisfy all the conditions in the RFP for. You know, the real question is what type of revenue could be generated.
Sure. Okay. So there is a guarantee, relative, I like the way you qualified that, and then a split beyond that, depending on the actual performance.
It can be written a number of different ways. Again, that's probably another question that we need to follow up. You know, what exactly are you looking for?
Sure.
In a partner?
Sure. Let me ask a question about cost structure. So, as the mayor mentioned, we did entertain at a previous point proposals, and I think that one of the issues for council, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, was the large management cost that was associated with these companies that wanted to run our parking system. So with that in mind, how will your company go about managing getting the greatest efficiency for the least cost? You know, bearing in mind there's a peak season and essentially the rest of the year is an off season.
Mm-hmm. Again, some of the questions we would have on the existing RFP, I believe Lisa said there's going to be a new one coming out. We will be able to better define that. You know, as we're basing it now, there are some dependencies that we're just not quite sure if For example, in the RFP, it talks about staffing a town office and using approved and correctly marked vehicles. Well, if we could use an electric golf cart versus a pickup truck, for example, that would change our management structure and costs, and obviously, hopefully improve the bottom line for you. Utilize the latest in technology for parking stations, which are all solar powered. We can install them in better locations that obviously are more appealing, but more effective and efficient to bring the revenue in. You know, in the old days, you'd have a lockbox and kind of an honor system in a lot of places. With the new system, we feel like we can obviously drive better revenue. It's better for the public, better user experience, and our company is going to pay for that technology up front and amortize it based on the costs. I believe this contract is a 3 years, 2 years.
We've been working on an RFP that sort of redid this in front of council today. Excuse me. But basically, we have parking within all the right-of-ways down on the beachfront. We have beach accesses, and the town has acquired a piece of property in the Yopon area, the east end, so we'll have a parking lot on the east, here in the middle, and then one on the west as well. So we'll have 3 parking lots that we'd be utilizing, and then the rest is basically what you were hearing earlier, right-of-way parking. We have the place streets that come off the beach and go to Dolphin. We can put the 45-degree parking or parallel parking or whatever we choose to put there. So that's where we have mainly our parking's going to be that area. So we're not trying to do, excuse me, the commercial corridor, the businesses. We're not trying to put paid parking in that for right now. Everything's mainly going to be considered on the beach. Better beach rentals and Oak Island accommodations. I'm sure we can get some stats from them on rentals and how many people they bring into the areas and the months that they have 100% or 70% or whatever to be able to try to help you as well.
Do you have the information, or are you starting to collect the information already for your proposal?
So we have an old, I believe this is from 2016, we have an old request for proposal, management of parking operations document, which we've gone through and developed a list of questions. I'm not sure that those questions been sent back to you, maybe not. I have them here. And then from there, again, just hope to talk through this so we could better understand what the needs of the town are and go into our RFP submission to you with a full knowledge of that, so then we could really address each issue as it.
How long do you think it'll take you to get that together so you can do a full-blown presentation for us?
It would probably take a week for us to reply. Probably, I mean, if we can do it shorter period of time, but this, with Turkey coming up, people's travels, it might take a little bit.
I understand.
But I have most of the questions, answered from the older one. It's just a matter of deciding what your preferences are of, 2018 rather than 2016.
If the town decided to go to paid parking, how long would it take to get all the equipment out where it needs to go and ready to start?
Well, a couple things. We'd obviously need to design or help design with you, alongside you, the actual parking spots and how they're going to be enforced and, what they're going to look like. We will then provide some cleanup assistance. We may need to put some curb stops in and paint lines, like you said. From there, it's about determining how many stations we would need, the locations, have an agreeable location for each station. In other words, we need you to sign off. We need you to basically sign off on the design of the signage, where it's going to go, what it's going to look like. And then from there,
how far away would you put these stations?
well, we would work in conjunction with you. It depends on the design of the spots. If you're talking about just a parallel parking street, you would need one probably maybe every 10 or 15 car lengths. If you're talking in 45 degree, you could get it, one station would service obviously a lot more cars in that scenario.
So would you look at putting one for each road that we have, or each block?
Without more specifics, I would hate to give an answer like yes, yeah. I mean, we want to put as many as possible in there to, again, improve the user experience, where it's, it's easy to find at parking stations. At the same time, we don't want to flood your beautiful island.
Define what you mean by a station.
I'm sorry?
Define what you mean by a station.
So a station is where you would go in and, depending on how we design it, you would type your parking spot number, how long you're going to stay, put in your credit card. It would process the credit card and give you a tag that you would pay and display inside of your dashboard.
Now, do you have an app to do it from your phone?
There is an app from the phone that you can do it, depending on the technology that we ultimately go with. We're fairly agnostic on technology. We like the end users to pick which ones they use best. Again, depending on how you want it to look and operate, we may recommend one or two different versions of stations for you.
Now, you do the monitoring, so you would ride through the area to make sure everybody has their displayed ticket?
That's correct. We would reply back to this RFP with our enforcement as well.
Do you have sort of an average number that you use, or is it per square mile or per spot that you need people?
Depending on behavior, it's about 1 or 2 to 3% of the number of total visitor hours you would need to enforce.
So during the non-season time, you would just cut staff back, or if council chose not to charge parking during that time, your rate would reflect that?
Again, based on your recommendations, we would design it how you would like. In the pro formas that I have seen, they have not attached any revenue to the winter months. So,
now, we have events or whatever for like Beach Day or whatever we have here behind Town Hall. Is it a simple process to give out free parking for that day event, or if somebody pulls up and tries to get something from the machine, it'll just say free parking today? Or
in the RFP, as we reply to it, we are the understanding that we'll need to have staff on the island. We would need to increase the number of staff for special events, and I believe that would qualify as a special event.
I think, Mr. Keller, are you talking about if there's a big event here, we would not charge to come to the event that day?
Right.
We would,
So you wouldn't need additional staff?
we
You
would
wouldn't
just
need
need to
any
be able
staff?
to change.
Well,
Whatever.
sometimes you'd like folks out in the, waving you into a better
Well,
spot.
that's true too.
Again, this is your parking system, and we're going to help you design it. We're going to manage it. We're just going to split the revenues and costs very equitably. I think, when you see our RFP, it will be advantageous to you to be more on the participation side of it rather than just pure cost side of it. And I think if we do it right, again, we can improve the user experience through paid parking and not the other way around. We want people leaving Oak Island having a great user experience with the parking, with the beaches, with the food, with the businesses, with the places they stay, etc.
Okay, I've been coming down here for years, and I've always parked for free. I come down here, I park, I get a ticket. I am really, really upset. Who's going to handle that?
The ticket or the emotion?
The really, yeah, I'm ticked off. I'm coming, where am I going? I'm coming to town hall to complain. Or are you going to have somebody here to take that complaint? Or are we going to let Steve handle all that?
Let me get through. Let me take that kind of in 3 pieces. The first is I would suggest that we do a lot of very good communication that we are going to paid parking. The reason we're doing it, right?
Right.
Whatever you want to say, we're going to help keep Oak Island beautiful, or it helps us provide wonderful beaches to you, however you'd like to do it. So let's make it very obvious to everyone on the way in before they get here that we're moving to paid parking.
I believe Councilman Weinkoff even said for the first couple of years, put a sign at the bridge as you come in.
I like that.
Paid parking.
Morning, paid parking.
Yeah, from there, you may want to consider how enforcement is structured. I would recommend in this town that we avoid booting people, for example. We may want to put, again, something very user-friendly as a note on the ticket, as it were. And then as you are upset and dealing with the ticket, we'll have an online service where you can go in an online portal where you can go in and either pay that ticket, or maybe we will forgive one.
I'm coming to town hall.
Right. From that, okay, so in that one, that goes back to a question I have in the RFP. So we have to, as part of the RFP, we have to staff an office. And the question I would have is, can we staff one in Town Hall or near Town Hall? Okay. So, but they could certainly go to an office that we would have.
Yeah, I think that needs to be taken into consideration, because you're gonna have some people, I don't care how good a message you give or how you explain it, they're gonna come and vent, if you will, to somebody. And, there needs to be a person designated for that purpose.
No question. And I believe also in this, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would also be responsible for handling the resident parking permit. Is that right?
Well, that was something we'll be talking about here in just a little bit, but, that may be and it may not be, I don't know.
Okay.
We would not probably have you doing the enforcement of it, it would fall within our police department, but that's something the council's going to decide which way they want to go on that.
With your program, is there a way to, I watched during the hurricane how the new generation operates and how they quickly mobilize for relief supplies and stuff. And I believe there are some programs out there that allow you to reserve your parking spot if you're willing to pay for it ahead of time. I think it go ahead and charges you, but you can reserve your spot. Is that possible, or is that just too complicated to?
Well, you know, we have 250 different locations, and each location has a certain set of demands and needs and clientele and how it's laid out, technology, et cetera. So those are things that certainly do happen more in an urban setting, maybe a smaller setting, more of a garage setting, professional setting.
Yeah, I don't know how we can do that part.
That would be difficult.
I would recommend that you avoid that. But again, I think we want to provide enough technology to make it a seamless user experience, but very simple technology where we're not giving one person an advantage over the other.
So technically, if I come to Oak Island, because I get a lot of complaints like this, even on our street ends where there's residence parking that's set aside for just the Oak Island residents. One specific one that stuck out in my mind was it was 4th of July weekend, and this resident rode up and down the island to find a parking spot that he could park in. And he found someone pulling in a resident parking spot. And he stopped him and said, "Wait a minute, that's for residents only." And the guy said, "I don't care, I'll pay $50. It's a New Jersey license plate. So, I mean...
Ain't a whole lot I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about that one either.
Can't do nothing about that one either.
My mother-in-law is from New Jersey, so I certainly understand that.
Well, I didn't mean anything. I'm just saying it was out of state. I should have stated it that way.
I'm from New Jersey.
You know, there's nothing that we can do to prevent bad behavior. There are certainly things that we can do to remedy it.
But if it's a resident parking spot and
I completely understand. What I would suggest is that we really sit down, should we be the company selected, really sit down and hash out exactly what you'd like to have happen from an enforcement perspective and run through all of the scenarios. That way, again, we're just responding to what your desires are from not only a revenue perspective and a cost perspective, but enforcement. And I think enforcement is something we really have to be careful on as you're a town of visitors, vacationers, partial homeowners. We really need to have people leave here with a smile.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on such short notice.
Thank you.
Okay, council. Any comment on paid parking?
Can we take 5?
Take a break?
Can we take 5? I just need to run.
5-minute break,
No,
please.
Emerald, I don't like you to.
We have to wait for a green light. Call the meeting back to order. I guess we're going to start with the discussion of paid parking and then kind of talk a little bit more about the ordinances and the right-of-way parking. So who would like to open that discussion?
I'd be happy to start, Madam Mayor, as I am an advocate for paid parking. And I would say this about paid parking, which we have agreed as a council to revisit. I believe it's necessary. for beach preservation, for property management, for public safety, and I also believe it's inevitable. I think the design of paid parking is something that is going to require careful, studious attention. Toward that end, Councilman Blaylock and I met with the mayor and with town management to look at paid parking with a new set of eyes. And I want to thank the mayor for providing a considerable amount of data to us. We went through that data carefully. There are 8 beach communities that already have paid parking. They have some characteristics that I think that we need to build into our consideration of paid parking. So, first of all, parking is free for residents. There's, in all cases, a nominal charge that's similar to what we have now, although I believe our charge is unreasonably low at $5. They all have some form of technology. Most of them have mobile apps. All of them have a very clear-cut rationale for the system, and list the amenities that have been paid for as a result of the parking fee: beach improvement, amenities, et cetera, et cetera. Most of them have a 2-hour a charge per hour of $2. Most of them have a renter's pass. All of them have non-resident provisions. So I think those are important things for us to think about. It would be a large first-order change, and we need to be very thoughtful about how we proceed. We identified some other traits that we think should be in the RFP that's going to be built. I'm going to start with the 2 that I think are most important. The first is the length. We would recommend a much longer contract, with the first year essentially establishing a kind of performance benchmark. I do not think that we can make realistic assumptions about revenue and system efficiency until we run it for a year. I would recommend a 5-year contract, with the last 4 having a guarantee. One of the things that we talked about, and I'm going to turn this over to Councilman Blaylock in a minute, is the need to have a revenue source for the beach which can justify the disruption to the normal pattern of life. And we used $100,000 a year as the target, which obviously amortized over 10 years is $1 million worth of beach funding. Whether we're building bathrooms or benches or putting sand on the beach, it's $1 million that the residents don't have to pay for. Because as we look at beach renourishment, even in the best possible scenario, everything comes true. All the sand promised to us by FEMA, dredging, et cetera, we're still looking at $20 to $30 million that will have to be borne by the taxpayer. So I would argue that paid parking, if it's done successfully, is something worth doing. And I think $1 million over the next decade may be the low end. We simply don't know. Some other things that we agreed on was that parking should be free for residents after they pay the initial fee for the sticker, for the disabled, for veterans. There should be an agreed upon rate structure which is clear. There should be an agreed upon fine structure. There should be an arbitration process, which Councilman Blaylock brought up earlier. Obviously, we need to set hours. We also need, I think, to get a bid from a company that does not have outsized management cost. One of the difficulty with the last set of bids was the bids created a structure that lasted for 12 months when our peak season is essentially 4. And we were paying for management and material and boots on the ground that we, from my point of view, that we didn't need. So I think those were the high points of our discussion. Councilman Blaylock, did I leave anything out? Or from your perspective?
No, sir, I think you covered most of it. The biggest issue I have, and that's, I would like to see a presentation. I'd like to see the numbers, because that, to me, that's the selling point. And we have to, and very important along with that is we have to let our citizens know what they're getting for this, because I can tell you right now, a lot of them don't want it. You got to show them what they're getting for their money. I have talked to some of the businesses, and you got the same issue there. What they're afraid of is if you do paid parking, they're gonna go someplace else, and they're gonna lose revenue. I've talked to most of the businesses I talk to, when I mention day trippers, they tell me that day trippers do come and spend money with them. And that's one of the things that we were, and I hate to use the term, the main target for this is the day trippers. The people who come here, put trash on the beach, spend time, usually bring their own stuff with them so they don't buy anything here, and leave. And they're not basically holding up their end of the bargain, so to speak. They're using our facilities, they're using our beach, but they have no buy-in. So I think that's very important. And I go back to the same thing. The most important thing is show me the numbers, and the other thing is, how are you going to enforce this? Because this is going to be the real issue. Because if you, it's going to be a nightmare if you don't set it up right. But I'd like to see presentations from these companies who.
That's where your RFP comes in.
Yeah, I'd like to see at least 3 of them. What they have them come in and do a full-blown presentation and show us what they can do. Because, like I said before, if we put in paid parking, you're going to have somebody, and I don't care how you do it, it's the chief of police or Steve or whoever.
Poor Steve.
Somebody is going to have to deal with these people, and it's going to take time. Because the ones who come to visit, you might be able to sell it to the people on the island, in the town, but you're going to have people who've been coming here for decades, families and everything else, you're going to have to sell it to them too. You're going to have to tell them where their money is going.
So, if I may, Madam Mayor, Councilman Blaylock and I are essentially the committee on this. I do agree that the clarity of our message and the return on investment are important things for our public to know, why we're doing it and what, in effect, how they benefit. The business issue is interesting to me because in looking at the list of towns that have it, there's no indication whatsoever that it negatively affected business. Actually, quite the contrary, which is interesting. So I would welcome more data there too. And we can talk to Atlantic Beach and Carolina Beach. I mean, their businesses are not negatively affected by parking, quite the opposite in several cases. But we can get those numbers. And I do agree that it would be beneficial to have the successful bidders, if you like, appear and answer questions. And I want to thank Eric for coming in advance of that. And the point that Eric made that I think is important is that we get to design the system. And we need to think, per your last point, Councilman Blaylock, very clearly about enforcement, how that's going to occur. I can tell you from the research that the mayor sent to us that there's a mixture there. You know, in some towns with paid parking, the police enforce it totally. It's a law enforcement function. In others, it's a hybrid. There's a management company and the police back them up in some combination thereof. But we will need to think about that because we certainly want to be a tourist-friendly town. It's our driver for our economy. So that's a key consideration. And I think it would be good to have public presentations, absolutely.
Madam Mayor, we beat this subject to death. It's now November. We have a town hall that should be scheduled for January meeting. I would like all the RFPs sent out. These companies come in here in January in our town hall meeting so the public can come in here, if they've got questions, let them ask. Because if we're going to look and possibly do this, April's not that far away. We can't keep beating this horse and nothing get done. The whole objective, if the money's right, is for the money for the beach so it takes the burden off the taxpayers.
Well, Councilman Blaylock, Weinkauf, I'd like to make one comment. I was with an organization that did a study on what towns like us have to pay from their general fund and from our taxpayers' pocket when we do go from 8,500 to 50,000, and that is not occupancy money. That is from the taxpayers, like the extra police we had, the cleaning up of the beaches, anything. The money from the occupancy tax is wonderful. That was my profession. I know, I love it. But it goes for, by bill and by law, it goes for one thing, and that's the beach and whatever marketing. This money would be able to be more flexible because it would go into their general fund and offset what the taxpayers have been paying for years. That's why you see so many beach towns following suit. There's just not enough money in a general fund or that you can get from taxpayers to pay for extra police and extra emergency and extra pickup and cleaning, and it's just not fair to our
And I agree, and that's what.
And a lot of people don't understand that. I was talking to a lady today, didn't understand that all that funding came from their tax dollar.
But I would like this really to happen in January, because a town hall meeting's perfect for something like this to get it out to the public. That way, we get the numbers we need, see if it works. They're here to hear and see what the presentation, see what's going on. And that way, there's no miscommunication. You're still going to have the naysayers, you're still going to have the ones that's going to be for it. But the whole idea of this was, when we looked at this, was for the beach. And to make sure this money went for that beach. Because it's not going to be cheap to put sand on that beach.
I still may be one of the naysayers, because if you're gonna give free parking to our residents, you're gonna give free parking to the people who are renting houses that have already paid accommodations tax.
No, I don't think that was suggested. It was that
About how many parking spaces do we have?
1,000, roughly. And we can have some more. I mean, we're looking at getting more on some place streets.
I think 1,100 is the number that we need to use. And what I would suggest for the rental agencies is that they would have the opportunity in most of these towns. Rental agencies have the opportunity to buy a season-long pass for the rental. So they're contributing to the fund as well. The only people, no one is actually free, because we currently pay for our parking stickers. So when I say free parking for residents, they would pay the fee for the sticker.
And if you rent a beach house, you have parking under that beach house. So
you would.
There's really.
You would, but here's the thing. Forgive me. Here's the thing.
I'm getting used to it.
I'm from New Jersey, so and I say that because for the rental agencies, that's a pass-along cost. Yes, you have parking in the driveway, but a lot of those people want to drive to the beach. They buy the pass from us, season-long pass. It's a convenience. It's an amenity that they offer the renter. That's a pass-along cost, and we get the revenue. Unless they're renting beachfront, they're probably going to want a pass. And I guarantee the rental companies will pass that cost along.
And this is something else we need to look at too, because I think it's got to be fair across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Golf carts right now don't pay for a pass.
There you go.
So if they're going to the beach to park, I think the fair thing to do would have that $5 sticker for it too.
I thought they did.
I don't think they do.
Do they? They do?
Sorry, they do.
Okay, then I take that back.
Just the same as a car,
Retract
if
your
they park in a residence
Okay.
space.
Any more comments? So, Jeff, are you putting that in the form of a motion or just a consensus?
I would like to have a consensus from council that we move forward to get the RFPs out and have a town hall meeting with all the people coming here, companies coming here to do the presentation in January. So
I'm okay with that.
everybody is,
Okay with that.
I'm fine with that, but I would like to amend your motion this way,
it's just a
or your
consensus.
suggestion. I think we need a multi-year contract, with the first year being performance-based, because until we run it, I don't think we have any idea. I think we need a contract that has a guarantee in it. Let's see what, the bidders come back with. And I think we should restrict the successful bidders to no more than 3, so we don't have another 5-hour presentation here, as we did with our little legal show.
Right.
Okay.
We have another meeting scheduled with Councilman Bach and Councilman Blaylock on Monday. We can go over the RFP and get it back out for final review and get it out.
So
Just because we send out RFPs don't mean I have to vote for paid parking there, right?
Nope.
Thank you.
I'll second your suggestion, Councilman Wayne.
And I would also, if you could reach out to the accommodations company and get some kind of numbers from them to include in that RFP, so they won't have to be searching them down.
Can we personally invite them to the meeting in January?
Anybody's allowed to come to town hall meeting.
I know, but I mean, you know what I mean.
Invite whom?
Make sure that they know specifically
Right.
the rental companies,
yeah, we
because it
set
will
up-
affect them.
Well, and it gives
Rose
them
has a
time to ask the questions
list.
too. That's what I'm saying. If you get it in a town hall meeting, it's just an open discussion with everybody.
You'll never make it through 3 presentations if you open it up to everybody's questions.
Well, I mean, if you let them do the presentations first, then you take questions.
Well, you could also limit their presentation, could be more bullet points, because the details will have to be ironed out, sitting down and going over them.
The only thing that concerns me about the paid parking is our complex over at the fishing pier. And you pay $10 to fish on the fishing pier and all day. I don't know how many people's going to come for $27.
I believe there was some discussion about
Yeah,
that.
we,
wasn't there?
we contacted a few of them, and if you get the parking, when you go inside, you get the credit towards your fishing ticket.
Okay.
That's what some of them did. And then some of them gave the discount back, or,
And you've got some that buy the yearly passes, so that should be able to allow them to.
Okay, so now we got residents park free, and we got people on the pier park free.
they're paying to fish.
The fish.
Well, we want that.
We're just
Well, I think this
narrowing the
well, this
amount of paid parking.
this goes to the point that was made earlier about design. So Councilman Scott's raising a good question. So I would answer it this way, this is just a design notion. To me, if the rental companies want to give additional amenities to their renters, they can buy season-long passes at whatever fair rate is. If they don't, then that's up to the renter to pay the per-hour fee. People going to the pier, we probably need to change what we charge to fish. It includes part of the parking fee. So if it's $2 an hour and it's 8 hours of parking daily, $16 a day, and if they fish and they pay $14, they paid half the fee. They got 50% off for prime parking. We can structure it that way. And $5 for a resident is ridiculously low. I mean, that number needs to come up. But yes, residents will contribute something, just as they always have. And when we design it that way, then we can get an estimate of our revenue.
And I shouldn't say residents park for free, because we don't.
Correct.
I mean, we do if we
You
want to park.
you park for $5, then
Right.
think about that. Okay. But yeah, essentially, they don't pay the hourly rates, so they pay a season-long fee, and that's it.
Didn't we have somebody go meet with some of these towns? Did we ever do that?
We what?
Like go and meet with Atlantic Beach, or have we had that?
We've talked with them.
Jeff and David actually went somewhere where they pulled into a paid parking lot.
Up in
Emerald.
Emerald and, yeah, Pino Shores and, yeah.
The storm came when we was getting ready to go do our road trip.
Okay, because I'd like to hear about the administrative side of this from the people from these various towns, get some feedback from them on the difficulty or the,
Do that. Y'all could do that
Well,
with your
I-
little committee thing. You can
invite them to come visit, or we'll go there and visit with them, or whatever.
Well, I can tell you Emerald Isle, which was voted the #1 beach over us.
That still
They-
upsets you, doesn't it, Jeff?
They say residents are first come, first served. They pay to park. If they don't get a parking place, so what? And that's what they go by. And to me, I think our residents have to come first.
Yeah, they didn't have any guaranteed spots. When you pull up to the parking lot that day, if there's a spot available, you got in. If not, you didn't get in.
But that's the same way it is right now.
If we're out of the residential.
Yeah, if you're going to the beach, you can, it's not up to, just because you've got a resident parking sticker, you still don't have a guaranteed parking spot.
They have none. no designated for residents whatsoever.
We can discuss this Monday.
It was wasn't it $10 to park?
It was $10 on the, north end, $15 at the pier, and $20 on the south.
Okay, so now we go back to the shrubbery in the right-of-way, section number 2.
So that's the consensus then on, in January, is that right?
January.
Okay.
Everybody, yeah.
We're okay with that.
Consideration, we want to go back and discuss the construction or other improvements in street right-of-ways at this point? Or the,
Madam Mayor, if we could get a consensus on the 8-foot, 10-foot, or whatever first, and then go ahead, I think might expedite it some.
And I think our town attorney wants, before we make a final decision, to go over.
He wants to look at it on the legal aspect of it as well, as he presented to y'all when he was here at the August meeting, I believe. September,
Yes, August.
August.
would I like to make a motion concerning that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I support the Weinkauf-Blaylock proposal at the 10-foot level. I think that makes the most sense. And I would add again that the first phase of our communication plan be robust so residents know this is coming, they understand it, and that we focus on safety and denial of public access. That should be phase 1 of the campaign.
Except I wasn't 10 foot.
I said 10 foot.
I know, I'm not. I'm 8 foot.
Do I have a
Fine,
second?
I'll support 8 foot.
I
Forgive me, I thought you were at 10.
I'm at 8.
I was the one that was at 10. Okay.
Well, you gentlemen,
Your-
your bill is confusing.
Would you like to rephrase your,
Yes. I support the 8-foot level.
is there a second?
I'll second.
We're
it.
not,
Yeah, we
not-
can't vote on it.
We're not
We just have
voting, we're just doing a
consistent to go back to the-
consensus.
Has to be a
No.
consensus, go back to town attorney.
Okay.
Well, what
I say
Brian-
leave it the way it is.
What Brian asked for is.
He wants to see it
y'all to
before we
come to a
vote.
Consensus of if you want 8 feet, 10 feet, no feet, whatever you wanted. Then he could go back and look at the thing before y'all presented your final vote.
So what we need is a consensus, if
What
there
you
is a
wanna do.
consensus, to take that to Brian.
Yes, ma'am.
All right,
What say you, Sheila?
I say leave it like it is with a focus on water access and safety.
Scott?
I'll go with 8 feet.
Councilman Blaylock?
I still think it ought to be 10 feet. I went out and measured it, checked it, whatever you want to call it, opened the doors. And I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it from, if example, a police officer has to make a traffic stop, he's got to have enough room to get the car off the road, plus he has to get out and get in the road too. And to me, 10 feet is the minimum.
So you're not supporting the 8 foot?
No.
So we have 2-2. Councilman
8
Weinkauf?
foot, I've been 8 foot all along.
Now we
That
have
was at least
a
bit
majority of a consensus.
You got your 3 votes for 8 foot.
All right, David, I guess that's,
8 foot, and what do you want to leave inside that 8 feet?
Nothing inside 8 foot.
What do you want to leave in the right of way? Do you want to let them plant anything, everything?
Within
or-
that 8 foot, nothing.
No, on the property.
are you talking about fences, hard brick fences?
I think we've always said bushes and stuff.
We need to
I think
define
we've
it.
always said that was the original.
And that's the part that we talked about, be the enforcement, when you start putting the bushes that are only 4 feet tall to match a fence, or do we let it do whatever? And then that's when Charlie had a concern, if we let them put vegetation and block off the front, so then the police can't see into the I'm just asking the questions.
And where do I measure my 8 feet from?
Edge of pavement.
Edge of pavement.
Okay.
That's where it's always been.
So I can go now where I live, on Yacht Drive. And I can go 8 feet from the pavement and put anything I want to past that 8 foot.
No, bushes. Certain height, that's
Shrubbery.
what, shrubbery.
Shrubbery.
Well, y'all didn't say all that.
Well, that's what we had earlier discussions about.
Yeah,
So-
there's a written proposal, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm supporting.
There was something that had came out earlier within that 8 foot that they drawed up.
What I'm saying is, I'm not sure you're gonna be able to see traffic. How tall are these bushes?
Mean traffic, 4 foot. I mean, it's there now. There's nothing.
Not necessarily that, but when I get to 23rd Street and I'm getting ready to turn onto Yacht Drive, because I'm sitting on a corner, if I plant bushes,
You still have the
Yeah, you
25
still have
foot.
that, like they originally drew up. It's not, we're just saying the setback. What they originally drew up, we're still sticking with.
okay,
What they gave us at one point.
okay.
I think it would be important to get that document.
Yeah,
So
that
that we're
paper,
all
so we can see
addressing the
get
same
that.
thing. I
Yeah.
think that will help Councilwoman Bell to see what we're talking about.
But since we're
I
going-
know, I remember the whole discussion. I've got all of that, I'm sure, at the house. Just,
I want to be clear about something. Jeff mentioned it. Nothing in 8 feet, nothing.
Well,
Mailbox,
Mailboxes, things like
paper
that.
box.
Yeah, right, but,
About parking gravel.
no,
Well,
nothing.
that will eliminate itself if we go with paid parking, because that would be in the right of way.
But if we don't go
A
with
lot of this is going to eliminate itself.
If we don't go with paid parking, we still need to address the
Yeah.
issue. And I don't think anything, in order, for the sake of consistency and understanding, I think if you're gonna do 8 feet, it ought to be 8 feet everywhere and nothing in that 8 feet, period. Except what DOT allows. And just tell, we're adopting the DOT philosophy and for
Well-
safety purposes, and that's it.
no, this is not DOT philosophy, because DOT,
No, we're adopting their,
within the 8 feet.
within
he
the
is
8
saying
feet.
so, just for clarification. Beach Drive, Middleton, this does not count for Beach Drive, Middleton, Kings Lynn,
That's all DOT.
yeah. So, we're gonna have different standards on our roads than DOT does on theirs.
We have different standards now.
Okay. I'm just,
I mean,
for
DOT has
clarification, I'm just
24
asking a
hour-
question.
DOT has 24-hour parking in right of way, we have 72.
Okay,
So there's different standards.
okay. This is gonna be a cluster monkey.
Lisa and I will gather what y'all had said. We will compile it into an email to y'all to make sure that we give Brian the right item for discussion at the December meeting.
How about if we have Lisa go out and measure some for examples and take some pictures?
I have a camera.
Yes,
All right,
and we will drag Lee along as well.
moving along, because I know we have, Councilmember has to go to work, to number 3, and that was requested by staff that we go ahead and look at either approving that or not. And if paid parking becomes a reality, then all of that will be revised. Any motion on that one?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to adopt the proposed right-of-way ordinance revisions.
Have a second? All in favor? Okay. All right, we have 2 minutes left, so I apologize to the audience. I don't think we're going to have any time for discussion. If you have questions or have comments, please go to the website. We all have our emails on there. Send them to us. We will get them answered for you. Thank you for coming, and at this time, I entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it, guys. If you have anything, I'm glad to talk to you.